Welcome to the Unlist, and welcome to a video that some of you have probably been expecting for a long time. So this is my Floris video. Now, I've touched upon a lot of different aspects of Floris and their history in other videos I've done, like my British perfumery video, and I've done a short about Floris, comparing them to Creed, stating that they are kind of like what Creed has been trying to convince you of what they are, right? But obviously what they're not. So Creed talks the talk, Floris walks the walk is another way you can put it. I will touch upon that a little bit here in case you're finding this video and you haven't watched any of my past videos or any of my shorts, and this is the first thing of mine you've ever clicked on, so I've got you covered there. But by and large, this is going to be about the House of Floris, my experience with the house so far, and some of the fragrances I've collected from the brand. Let me just start by saying that I haven't really fallen this head over heels for a perfume house since I really went deep on Avon. Now that's saying a lot. I know some of you guys are, well, Avon's trash, especially if you don't know my particular relationship with Avon. You're going to automatically say, oh, well, if he's comparing it to Avon, I don't click off the video, right? But hey, again, you do what you want to do. It's fine. I'm just telling you, for me personally, those of you who know me know my depth of knowledge and interest in Avon. To say that I have fallen for a house almost as hard as I fell for that house, that's saying a lot, because I don't normally do that. I typically approach everything from a much more, much less passionate, much more of a sort of erudite, however you pronounce that word, observer. You know, I look at it objectively, the history, more analytical, right? I tend to approach most of the perfume I collect from that analytical standpoint. Not that I don't derive emotional pleasure from my perfumes. I do. I do very clearly get nostalgia. I definitely feel things when I wear certain fragrances. I just tend not to discuss that on my channel. That's not the kind of thing you really want to hear me talk about anyway, is how my perfumes make me feel. You could care less about how my perfumes make me feel, right? Let's be honest here. You could care less. So I tend to avoid that. But I just want to put it out there that Floris is a brand that has really put me in that same headspace that Avon usually puts me in. And I think that's really cool. So whether you don't like that or not, again, can't help you there. I'm just explaining to you why the sudden explosion of interest in the brand and all the bottles that come following along with. Now, the Cliff Notes version is, I've already discussed this in past videos, but Floris is one of, if not the oldest, continuously operating family-owned perfumery in England, and by extension in the United Kingdom. Okay, they were founded in 1730 by Juan Varanis Floris, a Spaniard, right? He actually came from the island of Minorca to the United Kingdom. It's a very similar story to Jean-Marie Farina, who came from Italy to Germany, and an Italian-born German perfumer that created the first real eau de cologne that helped solidify the importance of alcohol-based perfumes in the West over oil-based perfumes that had predated them, right? I know Hungary Water technically came out before that, but in terms of really creating the archetype that would then basically go on to dictate how all perfume was to be made for the next several centuries, including today, right? So Floris wasn't really that per se, but Floris was definitely the oldest perfume brand that was dedicated to perfumery in the United Kingdom, in England. Okay, so again, Juan Femenius Floris opened his shop in the same location it's currently in now. Okay, so it's been there the whole time. Number 89, German Street. He opened his shop 1730, and originally, like all of the other British perfumers that would follow, this is the thing with British perfumery that you guys have probably learned by now, is that unlike French perfumery and Italian perfumery and German perfumery, British perfumery always stems from a service business. It's like an outgrowth of a service. So barbershops, apothecaries, okay, or druggists if you prefer that term. All right. That's where British perfumery typically comes from. All right. Whereas in France and other places, these houses started life making perfume from the get-go. Okay. They weren't doing something else adjacent. Like even Pierre Pascal Guerlain, the first Guerlain perfumer, he started off creating perfume compounds. People would just buy raw materials. They'd buy the rose, they'd buy the jasmine. He made candles and stuff like that too, but always a perfumer. Okay? So Juan Femenius Floris started off as a barber. Okay? So Floris, in the very beginning, was a barber and also a barber supply shop. Made combs, made pomades, things like that. Obviously, the colognes came about because of the pomades and the need for something to splash on after a shave. So you can say that if not for aftershave or the necessity for aftershave, there wouldn't be Floris perfume. Okay. And this story just repeats with William Thompson of the Crown Perfumery. This story repeats with William Penhaligon of Penhaligons. This story repeats again with Geo.F. Trumper. Okay. A few exceptions. D.R. Harris was not a barber. He was a druggist, again, apothecary. So there are exceptions. Truefit and Hill, same way. Okay, Taylor of Old Bond Street, same way. But Floris was the first. That's the significance. They were the first, 1730. And the comparison to Creed comes from the fact that everything Creed claims about itself, or at least used to claim about itself, is really just a hot take on something that Floris has provably done. You know, Creed claims that they were around since 1760, making perfumes for kings and queens. Floris actually has been around since 1730, making perfumes. And, unlike Creed, they have actual ledgers proving that kings and queens and princes have bought their perfumes. They've kept all the receipts, basically, for the last 300 fucking years of receipts. And if that's not good enough for you, actual royal warrants that they've held from different royal families in and around the United Kingdom. Okay, they've held warrants from Windsor forever, and they've had various queens, and now they have the current king. Okay, so they have always held royal warrants for a long, long, long time. Creed, no warrants. And then the other thing is the whole father to son, 7 generations, blah, 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 that Creed likes to claim. Well, Floris actually has 9 documented generations of Floris family members. Not all of them carry the Floris name because some of them are the mother's side, right? And they get married into other families. So right now it's Bodenham, okay? Edward Bodenham is the current 9th generation owner of Floris. So apparently his mother was born a Floris, and then she married someone named Bodenham, and then she had him. And he carries Bodenham as his name. But that doesn't mean that there aren't others that have the Floris name. But you get my point. So everything Creed claims they are, Floris actually is. And Creed is not really from the UK. They claim origin in the UK because there are members of the Creed family who own businesses in the UK. And I've talked about this in my Creed videos, right? Creed and Cambridge, Henry Creed and Sons, leather makers, haberdashers, tailors, not perfumers. Never made a perfume, no documented perfume formulas, nothing, nada, zero. No perfumes until 1970, when Olivier Creed began purchasing perfume formulas from down and out perfumers and down and out labs looking to make a quick buck with a formula that they couldn't sell elsewhere, couldn't find a client to pick up. Olivier Creed was more than happy to buy it for a nickel and then put Creed's name on it. Gussy it up with more expensive materials, as he was wont to do. All that's documented somewhere that you can read about. But basically, Emperor's New Clothes. Literally, the Emperor's New Clothes as a perfume brand. That's what Creed is, reinventing themselves. Floris, however, has actually walked many miles in those shoes. They're not just talking and claiming. They bring receipts, and they've actually made the perfumes for the nobles, for the kings and queens, Florence Nightingale, Winston Churchill, okay? Marilyn Monroe even liked Floris. And this is all documented stuff. Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond. Okay, real people that are vouching for owning these perfumes. So, yeah, that's cool, and that matters. Now, on to Floris themselves. Since they are a British perfume brand, and I have mentioned this in my other video, their fragrances are very, very obviously English traditional fragrances. So what does that mean? If you haven't watched that British perfumery video, that means their fragrances are seldom sweet, they are seldom overtly musky, they are seldom overtly spicy. British fragrances are, if nothing else, very conservative in style and very measured and structured. So they're not super loud. They're not super ostentatious. They are just very moderated. And they tend to favor florals, sharp accords over sweet and round ones. Vanilla is never heavily used, okay? Sugary materials like ethyl maltol. I don't think I've smelled a single ethyl maltol anything with Floris at all, okay? Tonka is there. They use tonka, and they use vanilla a little bit, ethyl vanilla, and they use a little bit, but they go with that very traditional British style of being pretty, sharp, floral, fresh, clean. If there's a musk profile, the musk profile is very integrated with the perfume. It's not going to slap you like Koros does. Okay, it's not going to slap you like One Man Show does. It's not the way they go. Okay, it's not their style. And any perfume that you find from Floris that's traditionally English in style, if it does have a larger than usual musk note or sweeter than normal profile, then that's because they've gone out of their way to do that. They've made an exception. They've broken their own rule. They've made an exception. And they wanted a fragrance that was deliberately this way or that. And those exist, okay? So it's not like they don't make exceptions. It's just in general, you can expect their fragrances to not be these massive Tonka bombs or huge doses of Ambroxan Isoe Super, massive doses of woody amber, scratchy woody ambers, big, heavy civet or, castoreum notes, anything in large proportion, what I like to call hanging its ass out. Floris perfumes don't hang their asses out a window, like mooning you. They're not trying to do that. They keep it buttoned up. They keep it together. And that's what you can expect from a lot of British perfumeries in general, okay? And I talk about it in my video, so you can go back and watch that. But Floris is like the poster child. Floris is the poster child for that. Because all the other houses, True Fit and Hill, Taylor Wood Bond Street, Penhaligon's, especially because Penhaligon's is more global in style these days. They're more like just tourist trap stuff. But GOF Trumper, all these brands, they cut loose a little more. Floris doesn't cut loose as much as they do. So Floris is very much stiff upper lip, pinkies out, that whole thing. And that's why you love them, or it's why you hate them. There are no two ways about it. Okay? You either love them for that, which in my case I do, because it's refreshingly different from all this other stuff you see down here. It's refreshingly different from all that, which is why I love it. Because I've got all the musky and sweet and all that other, very, hanging its ass out. I have all that stuff down here. If I want any of that, if I want something overt and ostentatious, affected, right? If I want melodrama in my fragrances, I've got plenty of melodrama right here. But with these, it's devoid of that. And I can appreciate it. Now let's get on to the fragrances themselves. So all of my Floris bottles are relatively modern. I say relatively because we're talking made within the last 15 years in some cases. Some are a little newer, but there was an older bottle style. Before, I want to say 2000, 2001, 20th century Floris came in a couple different bottle styles. The really old stuff, 30s, 40s, 50s, round bottles. Very similar to Caswell Massey bottles. Round apothecary style bottles with a screw-on, splash dab or a screw-on spray that you can then take off and put a cap on. One or the other, can't have both. Either you have a screw-on atomizer or you have a screw-on cap. You don't get both. Then they moved to a bottle that's kind of concave, looks like this. You'll find a lot of those Floris bottles made in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So old bottles of the classics like Elite, like number 89, those are going to have that kind of convex shape. And then somewhere in the late 90s into the early 2000s, they introduced the current bottle shape, which they've had ever since. So for the past almost 30 years, past 25, 27, 28 years, they've had this bottle shape. And all my bottles look like this. So some of you guys out there who have the really, really deep vintage Floris bottles, yours don't look like this. But I don't have any of those. Okay, I only have these. Now, the oldest fragrance I have, catalog-wise, is going to be 127. Or I should call it special number 127. This fragrance has gone under a couple different names. It even went under the name of Original Gentleman's Cologne for a while. When it was given away, British Airways would give passengers bottles of this for promotion. And those bottles were labeled Original Gentleman's Cologne, but it's just another name for special number 127. What's it smell like? Well, it's came out in the 1800s, so you can expect a very cologne-like fragrance because that's what was popular in the 1800s. Anything before Jicky, basically. If it was released before Jicky, it's probably going to smell like a cologne because Jicky really revolutionized heavier, richer, thicker fragrances. The whole point of Jicky was to be a fragrance for its own sake, not to have any kind of other purpose, whereas all the colognes prior to that, you wore them for hygiene, you wore them to refresh yourself, in between bathing. You wore them for deodorizing purposes. They had other things besides just being a fragrance that you were to enjoy, right? So you've got to put that in perspective. Even things like Jockey Club from 1840, powdery, bracing, meant to be a deodorizer, okay? That's just what fragrances were in that time period. And it's really no different with this. So a lot of citrus, a lot of bergamot, rose is present in this. A little bit of lavender, but not much. Mostly you're going to get rose and bergamot. And you're going to get it over a very light, and I mean light, a very light musk base. So a little bit of like a civet style sour, civitone kind of musk, and some sandalwood. And the new bottles don't have real sandalwood because they're not going to. So, too expensive. So originally that was commissioned by Russian Prince Orlov, okay, when when Russia was still an empire and still had nobles before the October Revolution brought all that to an end. Now, the other one I have that's really old is Edwardian Bouquet. This came out in 1901, and it was designed to basically celebrate the coronation of King Edward, who replaced his mother, Queen Victoria, who died that same year. And he had a love affair of hyacinth. He loved hyacinth, so this is a very hyacinth prominent fragrance. But being as it was designed to be worn by a king, even though it has a big hyacinth note which feels kind of feminine to some people, the rest of the fragrance is still very much in taste with what a dandy of that era would like. So rose, jasmine, green notes like galbanum, civet musk, okay, very chypre base. So the best way to describe it for someone who doesn't want to figure out what notes are, you're not a notes person, okay, you want comparisons, think Aramis 900. Aramis 900 with the top note of Chamade by Guerlain, the women's Chamade. The big, chewy, green hyacinth of Chamade. Tack that onto Aramis 900 and make it much older. Again, not the 70s, not the 60s, 1901. So if that sounds good to you, then Edwardian Bouquet would probably suit you. I like it. It is like the granddaddy of Aramis 900. Like I said, the thing that makes it weird is that hyacinth. I like hyacinth, though. I like Charlie. I like Chamade. Hyacinth doesn't bother me. But some of you guys, you get a little loosey-goosey when you get a real, like, legit floral note. You get a little scared. So I just need to let you guys know that this rolls with the flowers, okay? And that's another thing is a lot of British perfume is flowery. So, if you don't like flowers, you maybe, it's in the name Floris. You don't want to go near the stuff. Now, a little less antique, but still pretty old, is this 1951 fragrance called Number 89. And Number 89 was the famed favorite fragrance of Ian Fleming, who I mentioned earlier, the creator of James Bond. Ian Fleming loved Number 89 so much that he made it the official fragrance of James Bond. And cologne is mentioned several times in the James Bond books, the original books. The movies, not so much, but the books, definitely. What does this smell like? Well, 1951, British austerity in full swing. So it's not going to be very sweet, not going to be very musky. It kind of falls in between some of the floral chypre stuff of the 60s, like Monsieur Lanvin, okay, something like that. But also, it kind of has that bitter dryness of a fragrance like English leather, something along those lines. So it's going to have this powdery kind of bitter dryness, but it's going to have civet musk, so it's going to have a little bit of a Uranus musk smell. But then it's loaded up with carnation, lavender, rose, again with bergamot. So Number 89 is kind of almost like the son or grandson of 127. It's almost like 127 with a heavier base. The florals of 127, but with a more mid-century style, musky, woody, chypre base. So if you like 127 and you wished it lasted longer, wished it was heavier, you don't mind a little carnation tucked in there somewhere, then chances are you're going to like this. Older bottles were much rounder because the civet was real and not synthetic, and real sandalwood too. New bottles, synthetic sandalwood, synthetic civet, so a little drier, a little sharper. Not quite as virile, I suppose. But honestly, it's still good. Still really good. And it doesn't smell modern. There is absolutely nothing modern about this. So, it's as traditional as it gets. Another one that I like, another older fragrance, is Elite from 1980. You're going to notice this bottle doesn't have the warrants on it. And you're going to say, hey, but I thought Floris had royal warrants. Yes, they do have royal warrants. But when Queen Elizabeth II passed away, okay, they were given a grace period where they can keep having her warrant. And until the new warrant from King Charles was secured, just in case he decided not to renew the warrant, it's his option to give the warrant to whatever business he wants. He could choose to turn around and give it to somebody else and not give it to them again. They have to print labels that don't feature the warrants just to be safe, so they don't, disrespect the royal house or whatnot. So they got the new royal warrant from King Charles, but because of that whole thing being up in the air for a little while the grace period expired, they went ahead and they made these warrantless labels like this that don't feature the warrant on the front. But I'm sure the brand new bottles that are going to be coming out soon that already have different labels than this will probably have warrants on them somewhere. I would find it weird if they didn't put the new warrant back on the bottle again. Why would you have a warrant and not show it off? It doesn't make sense. But yeah, these are from that period. So that in-between period. So this is a newer bottle, basically. Anything that has those other warrants you saw, those 2 warrants, those are before Queen Elizabeth passed away. Those are older bottles. This is a bit newer. Elite is a vetiver fragrance. Came out in 1980. And it basically takes vetiver, and it wraps vetiver in oak moss, leather, bergamot, a little bit of lavender. Okay, so just the best way to describe Elite for someone who doesn't like notes, take a vetiver fragrance, take Guerlain vetiver or something like that, and then drop some Dunhill Blend 30 into it. That rounded green, or another example would be Jewels with more vetiver in it. A more vetiver heavy Jewels by Dior. If you like that idea, it sounds good to you, and I like that idea, that's why I have it, then you would definitely appreciate Elite. It is very much that late 70s into the early 80s. Elite belongs in the same category as Jewels, as Blend 30, as Polo, as Essentia Low. It's in that same Louvet, as Essentia Louvet. It's in that same category. Now, let's see. Onward to even newer stuff. JF. This came out in 93. And this is kind of like the British take on a Cool Water, on a Green Irish Tweed. They looked at that style, the very heavy, sort of aquatic style, and they dialed back the aquatic materials. They dialed up the citrus, so more lemon, violet, green notes. So it's like a greener, more citric, more floral take on that Cool Water Green Irish Tweed style. So if you want that kind of fragrance in a more elevated way, a little lighter, a little fresher, a little more natural smelling, then JF from 93 is probably going to be the one you want from this house. And then, of course, there's just more recent ones that I have that I really enjoy. Like this one here, Saphiro. This came out in 2001. This was kind of like the unisex floral fragrance. This was like Floris looking at CK1. Looking at CK1, those kind of fragrances, and deciding to make their own kind of British take on it. So first of all, it's way more floral than CK1 ever was. That's more about tea, more about musks, synthetic hedione notes. This is much more prim proper. The petitgrain is very obvious in this. The neroli is very obvious. Bergamot again. Lily of the Valley. So very sharp, very clean. Perfectly unisex though, of course. Women, men, everybody likes Saphiro. And I heard for a time this was kind of like the Buckingham Palace fragrance. Everyone could pick this up and use it, including the help too. So that means, you know, the cooks, the cleaners, everyone was like able to smell like Saphiro when they were there. It was kind of like, it was just around, you know, which is kind of neat. I don't know how true that is, but it's what I've been told. German Street, 2014. This one is very much like a lovely violet coriander, a little bit of a barbershop vibe to it. Very fresh, very green, clean. It was named after the street that Floris has sat on for 300 years. The shop has never moved, always been there. And this is supposed to be a fragrance that smells like that area. Not having been there, I can't confirm, but I'm also not going to deny it either. So, then I've got Santal. Santal for a while was meant to replace sandalwood, the original sandalwood fragrance, but it's not really a sandalwood fragrance unto itself. This is more of like a light oriental. When you think of Santal, think of stuff like Mousse pour Homme, Very Valentino, Opium pour Homme, things like that. It's in that train of thought. People compare it to Gucci Envy for Men, and I don't really see it. It's not all that close to Gucci Envy for Men, but it's in the same vein. It's a bit of a rounder and sweeter fragrance than you typically get from Floris, but it's still not really sweet. I wouldn't call it sweet per se. Then there is Sol Ambar. This one is marketed to women, but honestly, I think it's unisex. I think men could really enjoy this too, because Sol Ambar is a really nice amber fragrance. It's not very sweet. It's actually a bit more on the dry, earthy side of amber, which again would make it more appealing to men than I think a big, heavy, sweet amber would be. It's got this really bright citrus top. It's almost like a transparent amber, which is crazy because you don't ever think of amber as being transparent. But it's got this little fruity citrus opening, pineapple, and some aldehydes, and it just gives this, it gives it a just a weird kind of crystalline amber. It's almost an amber fragrance you could wear in summer, which is really bizarre, but it works. And it's dry enough and British enough to check those boxes too. It's not very gummy, not very sweet, not super spicy either. Of course, you know, Floris has done oud fragrances. Their oud fragrances are very prim and proper and not super musky, not very medicinal, not very barnyard-like. So I'll just leave that there. I'll leave that alone. If you're someone that likes your ouds to be very woolly, then you won't enjoy that. Turnbull and Asser, 7172. Created for the famous shirt makers that are like across the street from Floris. They've been around a long time as well. And it's kind of an ambergris fragrance. It's got the salty sort of ambergris vibe to it. But then it's also got a bit of a clean laundry pressed shirt smell to be in line with the theme of the shirt maker's shop. I like it. I think it's good. Again, kind of checks the boxes on not being heavy, not being super musky or spicy or anything sweet like that. And then I'm going to leave it off here with this one. I think I've talked about all the rest. Yep, last one. So, Vert Fougere. This one's a limited edition, so you can't buy it anymore, unfortunately. But this one is like the Floris take on multiple generations of Fougere smashed together. So they kind of looked at really green, sharp fougères. They also looked at the barbershop ones, like Brut, like Clubman. Then they've got some modern touches in here too, like ginger and cashmere. But when you spray this on, to me, the best way to describe Vert Fougère for someone who doesn't like notes is it's kind of like Sartorial by Penhaligon's with the metallic sharpness. Sartorial meets Brut. So the green shave foam facets of Brut combined with the metallic, hot-pressed kind of sartorial fougere smell. Take those Brut sartorial, smash them together. If you like that and you're willing to chase a bottle, because again, they're discontinued, but if you're willing to chase one, that's what you're going to get. So I like it. I think it's enjoyable. There you guys have it. There's my video on Floris, and there are others that I haven't talked about, like Bouquet de la Rienne, Honey Oud, all the other ones, Night Scented Jasmine, White Rose, tons of others, but couldn't fit them all in, guys. So catch you later. Thanks for watching.